Okay, so our next section are the specifications and features of this product. What does it claim to have? What are the features that it has that sets it apart from all the other controllers out there? So I feel like I'm going to start with my personal favorite feature, which are the two programmable buttons over here called M1 and M2. These are the two buttons which you can use the Razer app to program to any of the face or shoulder buttons. So you can make it at A, B, X, Y, left bumper, left trigger, or right trigger. I'll come to the uses of that in the next section, but for me personally, this is the feature that I've used the most on my Wolverine V1. It's the feature I use the most on this controller, and it's a feature that I feel like once you've gotten used to, and once I provide the uses for that extra button set there, you'll be hard pressed to do without it for any other controller. The other feature are the switches that Razer claim. The Mecha Tactile switches for the face buttons here, the A, B, X, Y buttons, which are 30% less actuation distance than a regular Xbox controller. So that means it has 30% less distance required to actuate it. And it also has a satisfying click, so it feels a little bit less spongy to the regular controller. The shoulder buttons themselves, whereas they might not have a mechanical feel to them, they still feel a lot more higher grade and more durable, made with better quality materials than a regular controller buttons. The triggers themselves have trigger stops, which is another feature that I feel like once you've gotten used to them, it's difficult to do without them. If you're not familiar with them, you flick the switch and your trigger actuates, or it stops at 50% of the distance down. It's a very handy feature for, say, first-person shooters, if that's your look and fire button, or for maybe a MOBA, where these are your ability buttons. You can get them fired quicker. Not ideal for maybe a racing game if this is your accelerate, so you want that to actually go all the way, so you can have all of the motion all the way down. But it's nice to have the little switches here, so you can actually just switch them on and off when you feel like you need them, or when you're jumping between games. The grips themselves have been redesigned. It has a L-shaped structure now. It's not the most obvious thing that you can see, but if you look at their merchandising and their branding, you can see that they've adopted a slightly different layout as far as the controller is concerned, so it sits differently in your hand and it feels slightly more comfortable. It has the wraparound, rugged textured grip now, which feels great in your hands. It has the share button on the face now. So in line with the Microsoft Series X controllers, it has a button over here which you press to take a screenshot, or you can program it to rather take a auto record of your last 30 seconds or 45 seconds, whatever you've set it as. This is meant to tie it in line with the next generation of controllers, because the older generations didn't have that button. So this more aligns it with the brand new model of controllers. The other face button that it has added is the volume settings. So you press this button and you use the D-pad to adjust between your game and your party balance, or use up and down on the D-pad with that button pressed to make the headset volume higher or lower. One thing to note is that won't work with wireless headsets. You'll have to use the toggles on the headsets themselves. It only works for headsets that are plugged in through the 3.5mm jack on the front here. One of the things that I've noticed some people don't like about this controller is the fact that it has a fixed cable. Like the previous generation, it was a wired only controller, but this generation you can't remove the cable at all. It does have a quick tearaway cable there, so when it's plugged into your console and someone knocks it, or your dog gets his feet caught up in your cable, which has happened to me a few times, this will quickly and easily just rip out, rather than damaging the USB port on the console side or pulling the controller off the table. It's actually quite a handy little feature, and you don't really realize how much you need that until it quickly gets pulled out when something knocks it or pulls it. So for me personally, when I first reviewed the Wolverine V1 or Generation 1, I marked it down a little bit because it had to have the cable in it at all times. But after having used that controller for a few years now and never having to worry about batteries or keeping it charged, I'll have to say that that is one of the most surprising features of having a cabled controller is that you never actually have to worry about charging it ever again, or getting batteries, or running out of power in the middle of a gaming session, like has happened with my headset a few times, and like has happened with the original Xbox One controller when I first used that. So I'm not actually going to say that is a design flaw of the controller. As far as I'm aware, that is a requirement because the motors for the vibrator inside the controller are actually bigger than in the standard controller. So if it was a battery operated controller, the vibration will probably wear it out a lot quicker. I feel like that's one of the main reasons why they've had to keep it cabled up. But I also feel like it would have been nice if they just allowed you to have a battery version of it. Even if it has a very short battery life, it would have been nice to have that option. So not marking it down too much, but I feel like it would have been nice to have that. A couple of design choices that they've made to change it from the first generation, and a couple of interesting choices that they've made, but it still feels like it's a high-end controller. It has the extra buttons, the trigger stops, the mechanical buttons, the nice grip, the adjustment between the game and the party volume built onto the controller. So I can't mark it down too much, so it's getting a 16 out of 20.